Hi, my name is Al Sonnenstrahl. I'm the president of DSA, Deaf Senior Association of America. And hello, I am Richard McCowin. This is my sign name. And I am on the board, a board member. I'm from Nebraska.
Hello, everyone. My name is MaryLynn Lally. Most people call me MaryLynn. And I'm a board member as well from the Maryland Senior Citizen Association, which is in an alliance with the Maryland Association of the Deaf as a senior representative.
And I live in Maryland. But guess where I'm at right now? I'm in heavenly Vermont. The beautiful trees all around me. It's so nice. It's very nice to be able to enjoy my retirement here. And so today we're going to be talking about aging. Why am I interested? Well, I was born deaf. I had deaf parents. So I have a lineage. I'm not going to tell you my age, though, but a long time ago, back when there was no TV, there were no interpreters, some time ago. And my mother was hard of hearing. And my parents, and it was just me and my parents, the three of us. You know, we didn't really feel connected. And as I've gotten older, access to TV, no captioning, newspapers, the TVs without captions, without interpreters. And now we've seen more captions and more interpreters now. But back then, there were TTYs. And now we've advanced to video phones, VRS service. When we go online, we have access to everything. We have a lot of equal accesses that we depend on. Before, we used to have to depend more on our neighbors and more on people, but now we can be more independent. With coronavirus, we've been at home, and yet we still have access to information. TVs have captions, movies have captions, everything seems to have access. So when we are talking about coronavirus, we're still free. And at the same time, as we get older, our skill levels decrease, our independence decreases. And we start having to depend on people again. So then I have to wonder, what does our future look like? We go back in time. We're talking about nursing homes and no communication access at that point. Maybe don't have the access to the TV. And you become isolated and in a world of isolation and feel alone and isolated. And not being able to be included, and instead of having our independence be able to be ongoing. And so that's why I'm really involved in this organization, because I'm wanting to advocate for aging access.
This is MaryLynn. I'd like to add a little bit of that. A while ago, NAD had a conference where a proposal was made at this conference to set up a DSA NAD task force. And primarily to focus on aging issues. And so for the 2 years on that task force, what we did is we created a checklist of what it is that senior citizens or those that are aging, the things that they need, what we need for access into nursing homes, captioning, interpreters, and what nursing homes are willing to provide that. Are there ways to communicate, and how do we do all of this? So there's this checklist that was created, and we kind of compared ourselves to what is it going to be like in our golden years. Long-term care insurance, those types of things were all reviewed on this task force. And we presented this at the DSA conference, I believe it was in Seattle 2 years ago. When was that conference? 3 years ago? Was it in Seattle? Yeah.
Yes, it was in Seattle.
Right. Okay. So we presented this checklist and people were so appreciative and thankful for this checklist. Now we look at this and there's more to it. Nursing homes are not accessible. They are not meeting the ADA requirements. And that is becoming a concern to look for and to find deaf seniors who are in nursing homes. Where are these deaf seniors? And where are the checklists that to make sure that these homes are accessible to them? And so we need to advocate for the deaf seniors in nursing homes. But I'm not the one that can do that because I don't have a relationship with them. I don't have the power of attorney. It has to be in contact with their family members. And the family members may not know how to do that. Or if they do hear about it, they say, oh, no, I don't want this to happen because then they're going to pick on me. If I fight for accessibility, if I fight for interpreters, it's going to be harder for me. And so really, we have a long way to go. Being a deaf senior really takes a critical mass to change things. Just having an interpreter is not enough. We need to do more. We need fellowship. We need to have events like bingo, guest speakers. But we need these events to be accessible with interpreters. Otherwise, they have these events and we're in isolation, alone, by ourselves, with no access. Is there government intervention to help us? Is there some sort of support that we can give to us, advocacy to force people to follow ADA and the rules established by ADA?
Yes, you're right. Yes.
Yeah, Richard?
Great. Yes. Yeah. My view on senior citizens of color and aging people of color, there's so many word changes that have happened, and there's been more and more diversity. I'm fairly new on the board. I'm a new board member, and Cheryl Emery, I really tip my hat to her. She's one of the national leaders of the National Black Deaf Advocates, or NBDA Association, and I've been involved there. Yes, my understanding is that most of the people that are Black and deaf, and senior citizens as well, there's a little bit of a different approach than perhaps with other groups. And I'd like to explain a little bit more about those points. So there's health, there's mental health issues, there's lack of services, especially for Black, deaf senior citizens as a group. And so those are some of the concerns that I see.
Yes. Yeah, people of color have amazing challenges that they have to account with. I'd like to add, here where I live in Frederick, Maryland, there's a large number of deaf aging people. And many of them are comfortable because they've earned decent salaries and have been able to retire. So they're not really on their own. They can go into the care of their choice. They don't have to have insurance companies that have to dictate what they're doing and say, you have to be on this type of a certification list to have this type of a care. People who are lower class or maybe even lower middle class, they're stuck with dealing with hearing agencies who don't sign. They don't have a support system. They don't have a lot of choices where they're put in. They're in a nursing home where potentially they're the only deaf person. They have no communication. It truly is a serious issue in the way that it's being addressed.
Very true. And I would like to explain a little bit about DSA. DSA was established in 1992, and the purpose was to socialize, and that's all, just to socialize. And NAD had their lane and their advocacy issues that they were dealing with. But at that time, and up until that time, we started to notice there was a need for senior citizens that was very obvious and very clear to see. They needed accesses. So we were able to get more and more involved on a limited amount of support to make sure that the things that were needed were being met. And senior citizens as a whole, and we're talking about socialization, we're talking about people, caregivers, and people who go and take care of them at their homes and assist them and take care of them, or maybe they live with that person. and to help to take care of that person in their home as long as possible. And having caregivers all over the United States that are trained all over. I mean, we have that, but there's none that sign. So what does that mean for a deaf senior citizen? It means that they're going to need more help to be independent, someone to come to their home. But what if they come to their home and they don't sign? There's many deaf senior citizens, and the system is failing for them in some ways because the people can't communicate with their caregivers. So really being able to give information and training to include sign language as part of the access and as a long-term care LTC or long-term care insurance, more and more having governments establish that long-term care programs as well, and having policies that we can pay for a person to be able to go to that person's home to be a caregiver, but not paying family members. And so the deaf person have family members that can communicate, but the person who's taking care of them can't. It's a stranger then who's coming to take care of them, and a stranger who can't sign. And so makes it so that there's no access. So we're taking a look into that too. There's many issues at work that we need to focus on. And I just wanted to add that. Did you have anything to add, Richard?
So this is MaryLynn. One example of this regarding the caregivers, there was a deaf couple here. The gentleman was fine. The wife has Alzheimer's, and he was not ready to put her into a nursing home quite yet. He didn't want to leave her alone. He wanted her to stay with him. So they had a short-term procedure where she had to go have surgery and had somebody to go and take care of her while that was happening. So I went to take care of the wife, to drive back and forth. And so I figured out, okay, I'll drive to the house. I'll pick up both the husband and wife, take the husband, drop him off at the hospital while I will take the wife out to eat, to breakfast or something like that. And I did this voluntarily just to help out a friend. But I'm sure that's not the only situation that people are facing. Many deaf people are facing those type of situations all over the country. And they're all in isolation. And so to have a policy that is established at the federal level that requires for there to be an interpreter having sign access. It is required. It is already there. ADA says that this must happen, but people are afraid to advocate for their rights. And that's what needs to be addressed. We need to ask everybody in every state association to, be more active and support the NAD with their mission of providing the support for our aging population and our deaf seniors.
Yes, this is Richard. Maybe about 45 years graduated from high school. And 45 years I've been watching, and I've seen three different groups. Well, no, two different groups. The first one is aging of color. And then the second one is aging our white communities. So there's aging people of color, aging white communities. And there's also, and so when I graduated, I went back to the farm. We're talking about rural. I didn't stay in that one big town that tended to have deaf clubs and things like that. When I graduated, I went back home. So we had these two different groups, right? And then you're taking care of the family. There were no caregivers. It was family. So maybe it looked like bilingual skills. Maybe there was or biracial skills. Maybe there was family support. They had to go out for healthcare. And then there were...
they felt powerless.
Thank you. For rights. And so trying to figure out who's going to take care of them. And so, wow, that was a lot. And so I went back home to my small little community where before there was all of these clubs and there was all these social interactions. Here there wasn't, which was a big challenge. So lots of things to be concerned about. And so also there was hearing family that made decisions for deaf people. instead of deaf people making the decisions for themselves. Right, right. Yes, exactly.
This is MaryLynn. It's sad.
Yeah, that is sad. And we're going to have to elevate the deaf so that there is an independence in them, and that they're, instead of being more dependent, and we don't want to go back to where we had to be dependent on other people. We want to elevate our dependence and continue moving forward independently.
This is MaryLynn. The NAD task force is really important for deaf people, deaf clients to advocate for themselves while they're still capable. Advocating meaning explaining to their children, to their families, what they want when they become older. When, I don't want to go into your home. I want to go into a nursing home that has people that can sign with me. I want to go into a nursing home where there are other deaf people. They need to advocate for themselves what it is they want when they get to that point. We were supposed to have Sue Pedersen here today, but unfortunately she was struggling with her internet connection, and she was going to explain what they're doing in Connecticut. They have applied for a federal grant, and they've received the grant, and that federal grant is to give them money to pay for people who need transportation or people who need to go and have their home cleaned. Having groups that are owned and run by deaf people, for deaf seniors, or for people who are unable to drive and be independent or not able to do certain things. And so they have this program, and it's a wonderful model for other states to replicate in order to figure out a way to help and enable deaf seniors. Nursing homes, I'm thinking, I know of 2 nursing homes. There's one in New England, there's the Home for the Aging, and then there's the Colorado, the Columbus, that's it, the Columbus one, where it's accessible and deaf people can be together. But those are the only 2 nationwide. So why doesn't every state have one? A place where deaf seniors can go, be with one another, and you have a variety of interests, a variety of ways of communicating. It's a challenge. It really is.
Yes, and also the housing. But looking at care for those places and the money and the funds from HUD housing and those departments and from the government, and being able to have those monies allocated for different housing in the community. Very hard to set up those facilities, and having places that we can borrow from, like HUD, to be able to build facilities so that people who are deaf can be there. Guess what? Hearing people, and they complain and they say, oh, I want to go in there. And then they say it's reverse discrimination because they're hearing and they can't have access to those places. It's not fair. So understand that the federal government responded, and they said that they had to let hearing people in for access. And so the deaf people were like, okay. And then guess what? The hearing people take over, and the deaf programs start to shut down, and the deaf people start to disperse, and the hearing people take over these spaces that are set up for deaf people. And so what we need to work on, making sure that HUD understands that when we're focusing on deaf people, we need to be able to have signing communities. We need to be able to have people who understand our communication. And so we have to look into that information and into that as not focusing on the reverse discrimination, but focusing on deaf housing being accessible for everybody. And also giving monies to each of the counties that are set up to provide services for hearing senior citizen, and including deaf people, because the deaf people are very spread out. There seem to be lots and lots of hearing people. They're more dense, and maybe you'll find 2 deaf people out here, 2 here, 2 there, but being able to come together is not really happening. There's no funding for that, no monies for that, in order for them to live in that county. And so maybe they're out of the county, but they're not able to join the programs. And so now we're going to have to really work on these issues, making sure that that we're decentralizing
Decentralizing the programs.
Thank you. Decentralizing the programs, having programs that are focused on deaf people, and having it be deaf centered, and being able to work on that as well. And Richard is saying yes. The National Black Deaf Advocates, or NBDA, they have several groups, or senior citizen groups. And every 2 years, they tend to have a lunch or breakfast, and they have talks, and they all gather together and get together as a group every 2 years, where we feel special and included. And then we go back home feeling like a lot better, you know? The other thing is that having schools and impressing, catch that?
No.
And having separate schools for developing their own sign language called BASL, Black Sign Language. Understand that they never were socialized with the hearing deaf students, and they were segregated because they were Black. And so understanding that they have their language, their own signing, they have Black ASL, BASL. And then when they would go into socialized or mainstream, they would be in with the mainstream sign language, which was a white sign language. And so there's a rich history of segregation and how that influenced Black ASL. And so Black deaf and senior citizens are looking for socialization. Black prefer to be able to socialize, but during segregation, there was that time when we couldn't socialize. And so what's left is what we did. And so deaf state contacted
agencies.
Me. Thank you. Agencies contacted me and gave me their information. And we had video conversations with Black deaf people and trying to figure out where Black deaf people live. And as far as my friends that are Black and deaf, I mean, a lot of them are passing away. And I'm looking to see who's left. We want to come and have food. We get together at McDonald's, and we have events. And we get to go ahead, because it's freezing on me a little bit.
We have nights at the restaurants that we can all get together, and we can share our culture and share our differences and learn those and understand those procedures together. And that's something that I really see that's different with us.
Allison, that's really interesting where Black ASL came from and all of the issues that have been going on as far as socialization and, unity, standing united. And not because divided we fall. But when we stand together, we're united. So whether it's different communities, white, deaf, hearing people, and how they're teaching people about culture and the changes and the rules, and trying to see the need for culture. Every 2 years, we have a conference as well in Hollywood, not California, but Hollywood, Florida. It's very south. And it's a big event where everybody comes together, and we promote it all over the place. So if you're interested, definitely come join us, share your ideas and how to help each other. Our goal is to meet our goals, and we can do that together.
This is MaryLynn. Yeah, we need to have young leaders there to help with this, because this is a project. Yes, young people. You're right, 40s and 50s, you're right. But basically, eventually, they're going to become like us. And pretty soon, they're going to be where we are, and it's going to be awkward, and they're going to be like, huh, what, where? And so we need to take a step back. There are certain things that we can't do. But you know what? If I could have done these things 10 or 20 years ago, if I knew about it. And if people now understand what the problems that senior citizens were going to face 20 years later, then they could help out with that. So the Maryland Association for the Deaf, all of the different state associations for the deaf are thinking, oh, I'm not a senior. I'll be a senior later. It doesn't really matter. I'll deal with that when I get there. But you know what? That time comes quicker than you realize. Otherwise, if you don't take care of it now, your golden years are not going to be so golden. You need to really do it. We need to involve the younger people, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60-year-olds. It's really important to recruit them all in every state association, as well as within NDA, as well as with DSA, to be an activist and to fight for what could become your future in your golden years. That's going to be very important.
Yeah, you hit that. You said that so beautifully, Sue. You've explained that, how strong and encouraging that is. And we have all of these organizations, MBDA, SD, all of these different organizations that can partner together. We owe it to senior citizen people to thank them for advocating for us and support them. And working with state agencies like NBDA, MBA chapters, and teaching people and spreading the message of alliance and how important that is for us together.
Amen. Cooperation is important.
Yeah, and I mentioned what happened at the NDA conference. It was in about 3 or 4 years ago. And we noticed that NDA was full and there was a lot of advocacy, different areas, all of these different things that were being discussed. ASL.
Preservation, education, aging.
And a few people stood up and really helped to explain the future, and that it's your future. What is your future? And people were just completely shocked because they did not realize that they couldn't think not just about now, but that they had to think about the future, that all people are going to become senior citizens. Even if you're not yet a senior citizen, you will be. And so putting in the work for our future becomes very vital. And being able to establish all of these different programs and all of these different priorities so that partnering with DSA, and you mentioned several other wonderful organizations and wonderful alliances that we can build. And this is a wonderful collaboration right here as well.
This is MaryLynn, definitely.
And there's different conferences and different state and national conferences where crowds of senior citizens can be. We need to align ourselves, and young people, youth, can really.
We need to pass the torch to the next generation so that they can take care of it. Whether it's the NBDA, whether it's a state association, they need to focus on the youth to get them mobilized to take care of what's going to happen to them in the future.
And I think we're about to wrap up, says Al. Let's see. I think I'm thinking that this helped everyone to understand where we're coming from.
This is MaryLynn. Yes, definitely. We need you all. We need you.
Thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity to share our goals with each other. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye, everyone.